I'm Mary and I'm 74 years old. People tell me I look a bit younger than my age, though I don't know if that's a compliment or just a polite thing to say. Life has a way of humbling you, doesn't it? I never thought I'd be sharing this story with anyone. In fact, I had kept it to myself for a long time, but here I am. I have no idea who will read this or if anyone will understand, but the weight of what happened is still on my shoulders. Maybe telling someone will make it feel lighter, or maybe it'll just let it out into the world where it can finally be seen for what it was. It started on a Friday afternoon, a day that at the time seemed so ordinary. My daughter, Claire, and her husband had been telling me for weeks about their big trip. They were heading to Europe, something they'd been planning for a while. They said I deserved a break too, so they offered to take me to the airport, to see me off, as they put it. Of course, I wasn't flying anywhere. They just thought it would be nice for me to join them for the ride. I figured it would be good to get out of the house, so I agreed. I packed my things the night before, feeling like a little girl going on a school trip, even though I was way past the age where I needed a permission slip. When we got to the airport, I had no real expectations. I knew they'd be busy, but we said our goodbyes at the gate. Claire gave me a tight hug and said, "Don't worry, Grandma. We'll come back for you after we check in." They walked away, leaving me standing there by myself in the bustling airport terminal. I didn't think much of it at first. Airports always made me feel nostalgic and a bit lonely. I've always loved watching people rush around, the busy chatter, the sound of footsteps, and the occasional loudspeaker announcement. But this time was different. I waited. I waited for what felt like hours. I checked my watch and looked at the clock on the wall. It had been 2 hours already. I wasn't worried yet, but something didn't sit right. I tried to text Claire, but my phone was acting up, and it wouldn't connect to the airport's Wi-Fi. I decided to sit down at one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs and just wait. The time passed, slowly at first, then faster. I thought maybe they were running late. I told myself to relax, but after the 3rd hour, I began to feel a strange tightening in my chest. I didn't want to make a scene or bother anyone, but I was starting to wonder, starting to feel like something was wrong. As the 4th hour passed, I stood up, walked to the counter, and asked the attendant if there had been any issues. She looked at me, a bit startled, and told me she hadn't seen Claire and her husband in the area. "Maybe they're somewhere else," she said, and that was all. I asked her if there was a way to call them over the intercom, but she told me I'd have to wait until the next flight call. I nodded, my throat tightening. By the time the 7th hour rolled around, I was pacing. The once cheerful chatter around me had faded into a dull hum, and I couldn't ignore the growing unease. Something was wrong. I pulled my coat tighter around me, clutching it like a lifeline. I hadn't seen Claire or her husband in hours. My mind kept wandering to the worst-case scenarios. What if they'd left me here? What if they'd decided they didn't want to deal with me anymore? The words Claire said kept ringing in my ears. "We'll come back for you, Grandma." What did that even mean? I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been forgotten. At 8 hours, I finally saw them. Claire and her husband were walking toward the gate, laughing, their bags in tow. I must have looked like a ghost because Claire's smile faltered when she saw me standing there, waiting. Her husband, Robert, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Claire hurried over, her eyes flickering with that kind of fake warmth I had come to recognize over the years. "We didn't mean to leave you for so long, Grandma," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We just got caught up in something, and, well, we didn't want to bother you. You're so independent, you know." I stood there, my feet rooted to the floor. All those hours, 8 hours of waiting, rushed back at once. The betrayal, the loneliness, the confusion. It hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment I thought I might cry. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at Claire and Robert, and something inside me shifted. "Caught up in something?" I repeated, my voice soft but steady. "You left me here. You said you'd come back for me, but you didn't. And now you expect me to smile and say it's fine. Claire looked stunned, her mouth opening and closing, but no words came out. Robert shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting between us. It was as if they were waiting for me to give them permission to explain themselves, but I didn't need an explanation. I already knew. "You're both so busy with your own lives," I said, the words feeling foreign but liberating as they left my mouth. "I don't blame you for anything, but I've been waiting here for 8 hours. I didn't ask for your pity, and I don't need it either. I waited because I trusted you, but now I see what it really means." I turned away from them then, walking out of the terminal with my head held high. There was no need to say anything more. I didn't need them to apologize or even explain. I had waited long enough. From that moment on, I realized I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their affection if it wasn't real. I was my own person, and I always had been. So I walked out with nothing but the air around me and the sound of my steps on the cold marble floor, and I felt, for the first time in years, free. The days after that moment were strange. It wasn't just the lingering hurt from being left alone in the airport. It was something deeper, something I hadn't acknowledged before. The realization that my relationship with Claire and Robert had been slowly eroding for years hit me harder than I expected, but I didn't dwell on it. At least, not right away. I threw myself into my daily routine, the things that had once brought me comfort: gardening, reading, the quiet evenings with my old dog, Sam. He was getting on in years too, and I couldn't help but feel that the two of us were growing older together, quietly and without much fanfare. But something in the pit of my stomach kept twisting whenever I thought about Claire, about how she had looked at me in the airport. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been cast aside. It wasn't just the physical abandonment, it was the emotional one too. The small ways people treat you like you're invisible until you're needed again, like an accessory. I'd never truly allowed myself to confront that before. A week passed. Claire hadn't called. I was used to the occasional check-in, but this time it felt different. I wasn't going to reach out first. I wasn't going to chase her. So I waited. I had plenty of time, but with each passing day I found myself more disillusioned with the whole situation. My thoughts kept returning to that moment in the airport. "We'll come back for you, Grandma." Those words, so empty in hindsight, echoed over and over in my mind. They had meant nothing. A couple of days later, I got an unexpected call. It was Robert. My heart sank, but I answered anyway. "Hey, Mary, it's Robert. Is everything okay?" His voice was softer than I remembered, and for a moment I thought maybe he actually cared. But I was no fool. I knew better than to believe the sudden sweetness. "I'm fine," I said, keeping my voice even. "Just been keeping busy." He paused for a second, and I could hear him fumbling, trying to figure out what to say. "Listen, Claire's been really upset. She feels terrible about what happened. She wanted me to reach out to you. She wants to make it right." I nearly laughed. Make it right? Was this some kind of joke? Did they think I would just fall in line with their half-hearted attempts to patch things up? No, I wasn't that gullible anymore. "Well, I'm not upset, Robert," I said, my words sharper than I'd intended. "I'm just disappointed, but I'm fine. I don't need anyone to fix anything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. It was as if Robert didn't know how to respond, and honestly, I wasn't sure I cared anymore. "I understand," he finally said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. "But Claire really wants to talk to you. She's been worried." Worried? They hadn't been worried when they left me stranded at the airport for 8 hours. The thought of it, the audacity of them to ask for forgiveness so soon, made my blood run cold. "I don't think we need to talk right now, Robert," I said quietly, "but I'll let you know when I'm ready." And with that, I hung up. I didn't have to hear any more. I didn't want to. For the first time in my life, I realized that I had spent so many years appeasing people, bending over backward to make sure others were happy, that I had completely forgotten about my own happiness. This wasn't just about Claire or Robert. This was about me, and it was time for me to start thinking about what I wanted without apologies. I spent the next few days focusing on myself. I finally tackled the pile of old letters and photographs in the attic, memories that had been packed away for too long. I found a box filled with birthday cards from when I was younger, some from my parents, others from friends who had come and gone over the years. One card in particular caught my eye. It was from my mother, written just before she passed away. I hadn't read it in years, and the words struck me harder than I expected. "My dear Mary," it began, "you have always been strong, even when you didn't realize it. You've given so much to others, but don't forget to give to yourself, too." I sat there, holding the card in my hands, the weight of her words sinking in. Maybe that was what I needed all along. Maybe I had spent too long giving and not enough time receiving. Maybe it was time to stand up for myself, to stop pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. That night, as I sat in my living room, I made a decision. I was going to take control of my life, my relationships, and my future. I wasn't going to be some afterthought, some convenient family member to call when it suited them. If Claire wanted to make things right, she would have to work for it. She would have to show me that she understood what she had done, that she recognized how much time had been wasted on empty promises. I thought about the airport again, about how I had waited, how I had been forced to look at the truth of my situation, of my family's apathy. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just angry at them. I was angry at myself for allowing it to go on for so long. But no more. I wasn't going to be anyone's doormat anymore, not Claire's, not anyone's. As the days went by, I became more and more resolute. I would take back the control I had lost over the years, and I would do it in my own way. If Claire and Robert wanted to rebuild our relationship, they would have to prove it to me. I wasn't just going to let them sweep me under the rug again. It was time for me to stop waiting. And when they came to me, I would be ready. It's funny how quickly things can change. One minute you're holding your ground, telling yourself that you've had enough, and the next, you're sitting on the couch, staring at the phone, wondering whether to call or not. The truth was, I was still angry. I was still hurt. But there was this other part of me, a part I hadn't expected, that was curious. Curious to see if Claire and Robert actually cared enough to follow through on their promises. I wasn't about to make it easy for them, though. I wasn't going to be anyone's fallback plan anymore. The week after the call from Robert, things had gone quiet. Too quiet. Claire hadn't called, and neither had Robert. I wasn't sure what I had expected. Maybe some grand gesture, a heartfelt apology, but nothing came. They hadn't even sent a text, a simple "How are you?" or "Let's meet for coffee." Instead, they let me sit there in the silence, like I was waiting for a train that never arrived. It was the following Friday when I finally heard from Claire. I was just finishing my breakfast when my phone buzzed. It was a text from her, short and simple. "Hi, Mom. Can we talk? I've been thinking about everything. I know I hurt you." I stared at the message for a while. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to throw my phone across the room and never look at it again. But I didn't. I held the phone in my hands, my fingers hovering over the screen, and then I typed back. What exactly is there to talk about? I didn't know if I was being defensive or just blunt, but that's what came out. I pressed send and sat back, waiting for her response. My heart was racing, my mind spinning with all the things I could say, all the things I had been holding in for so long. I didn't want to go easy on her. I didn't want to forgive her right away, but I also didn't want to be stubborn, not when this could be the turning point, when everything could finally be laid bare. The response came an hour later. "Can we meet? I just want to explain in person. I miss you, and I'm sorry." I stared at the message, feeling my chest tighten. This was it, the moment of reckoning, the moment where I either closed the door for good or let her in again. I stood up, pacing back and forth across my living room. I had spent so many years trying to make things work, trying to please everyone around me, and look where it had gotten me. alone, abandoned. I had to remind myself that I was the one who was allowed to set the boundaries now. I wasn't the weak, forgetful old lady they thought I was. I had been living for 74 years, and I had learned that sometimes you had to take control. You had to make people understand that your love and your time were precious, that they couldn't be taken for granted. I finally texted back, "I'll meet you at the cafe on Main Street at 3. I had no idea what I was going to say when I saw her, but I knew I needed to see her face to face. No more phone calls, no more empty promises. I needed to hear the truth, or at least what she thought was the truth. And if I didn't like it, I'd walk away for good. At 3 o'clock, I arrived at the cafe. It was a cozy little place with dim lighting and quiet music playing in the background. The kind of place I used to take Claire when she was younger. I sat down at a table by the window and waited, my hands clasped in front of me. I hadn't dressed up for the occasion. I didn't want to look like I was trying too hard, but I had made an effort, just enough to show that I wasn't angry, just resolute. A few minutes later, Claire walked in. She looked older than I remembered. Her eyes were tired, her hair a little messier than usual. She looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. I stood up when I saw her, but I didn't move toward her. I wanted her to come to me. She hesitated for a moment, but then she walked over, and we both sat down. There was an awkward silence between us, a distance I couldn't quite bridge, not yet. Claire fiddled with her coffee cup, not meeting my gaze. "I'm sorry, Mom," she started, her voice low. "I know I've hurt you, and I don't know why I let it get this far. I thought I was doing the right thing, giving you space, letting you do your thing. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have been there for you." I didn't say anything right away. Instead, I studied her face, looking for the sincerity in her words. I had learned over the years to read people, and right now, Claire looked genuinely regretful. But that wasn't enough. Regret wasn't going to undo what had happened. I wanted more than an apology. I wanted her to understand what she had put me through, what they had both put me through. "I waited 8 hours in that airport, Claire," I said quietly, my voice steady but filled with emotion. 8 hours? You told me you'd come back for me. You didn't, and then you call me a week later like nothing happened, like I'm just supposed to forgive and forget. Her eyes welled up and she opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "No, let me finish. I'm not some old lady who can be pushed aside when it's convenient for you. I've been there for you your whole life, and this was the final straw. I'm not asking for you to fix it all, but I need you to understand that I won't be treated like an afterthought anymore." She didn't respond right away. She just sat there, her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something resembling understanding in her gaze. It wasn't the typical defensiveness, the excuse-making that I was so used to. It was something real. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I really am." I looked at her, my heart aching with the weight of everything we had been through. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about forgiveness. It was about me reclaiming my life, reclaiming my time. And if Claire wanted to rebuild our relationship, if she truly wanted to be part of my life again, she had to prove it. Words weren't enough anymore. They never had been. "I hear you, Claire," I said softly, "but you've got a lot of work to do if you want to make this right." And for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control return to my life. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe there was still time for us, but only if we both worked for it. The days after our conversation were strange. Not the kind of strange that left me feeling unsettled or uncertain, but the kind that made me realize just how much had been left unsaid for so long. I didn't feel relief after meeting Claire. I didn't feel anger either. I just felt exhausted. But I wasn't about to let this pass without taking a closer look at what I needed, what we both needed. I wasn't going to rush into anything, not this time. Over the next few weeks, I found myself watching her closely. She would text or call every few days, trying to reestablish a connection that had been broken for so long. but it was different now. I wasn't just playing the part of the loving mother or grandmother anymore. I was playing the part of someone who had learned the hard way that love doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. Claire came by a couple of times, asking if we could have dinner together, if we could talk more. At first I agreed, but I made sure the terms were clear. She couldn't just waltz back in as if nothing had happened. I wanted to see her make an effort, not the kind of effort that came with promises, but the kind that was shown through actions. One evening, she came over with a bottle of wine. We sat on the porch and talked about everything, though, strangely enough, we didn't talk about the airport incident much. The subject seemed to hover just above us, like an elephant in the room, but neither of us had the courage to bring it up again. Instead, we talked about everything else: my old garden, her new job, her life with Robert. The conversation was almost normal, almost like it used to be when she was younger, and for a moment I almost believed that things could go back to what they were. But that was the thing, wasn't it? Things weren't going to go back to how they were, not after everything. Claire had changed, and so had I. We had both been living under the illusion that the past could be repaired with a few words and a couple of gestures. But it wasn't enough, not this time. A week later, she called and asked if we could meet again, but this time I didn't feel the rush of anger or the need to make a decision right away. This time I felt something different, something that had been bubbling up inside me ever since that day in the airport. "No," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Not today. I'm not ready." She was quiet for a moment. "I understand," she said softly. "I'll give you space." And with that, she ended the call. But this time, it didn't feel like a rejection. It didn't feel like I was being cast aside again. It felt like I was finally setting the terms of my own life, my own boundaries. As the days went on, I found that the more I stood firm in my decision to take control of the situation, the more I realized something about myself. The anger and the hurt were still there, but they weren't defining me anymore. I wasn't angry at Claire anymore. I wasn't angry at Robert either. I was angry at the version of myself who had allowed things to go on this way for so long. The version of me who had spent decades giving, without ever expecting anything in return. But that version of me was gone now. I wasn't that person anymore. I spent more time with myself, doing things that I enjoyed but had put aside for far too long. I went to the library more, joined a local knitting group, and even started working on some old family recipes that I had forgotten about. The feeling of independence, of not needing anyone's approval, was intoxicating. I had been so afraid of losing my family's love, of losing my connection to them, that I had allowed myself to lose sight of the person I was outside of them. But now I was starting to see things differently. One afternoon, I went to the market alone, something I hadn't done in ages. As I walked through the aisles, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the way I was taking care of myself. I wasn't dependent on anyone anymore. I could stand on my own 2 feet, and I was proud of that. It wasn't about being alone. It was about learning to be content with who I was, without needing validation from anyone else. That evening, Claire called again. Her voice was tentative, like she wasn't sure if she was still welcome in my life. I didn't say anything at first. I just listened to her quiet apology, her attempts to explain herself again. "I don't know what to say, Mom," she began. I miss you. I want things to be right between us. I know I've messed up." I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to forgive her. I just sat there in the silence, letting her words sink in. It wasn't that I didn't believe her. It wasn't that I didn't think she was trying. But I realized something that night. Her apology, her desire to make things right, it couldn't be the end of the story. It couldn't be enough for me. "I miss you too," I said finally, my voice steady. "But it's not just about missing each other, Claire. It's about trust. And trust isn't something you can just ask for. It has to be earned." "I know," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mom. I just want to make it right." I paused before speaking again, choosing my words carefully. "It's not about making it right, Claire. It's about showing up, and showing up isn't just something you do once. It's something you do every day." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I didn't expect an answer, not immediately. But when she spoke again, her voice was quieter, more resolute. "I will. I promise." I didn't say anything after that. I didn't need to. The ball was in her court now, and I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to beg for her love. If she wanted it, she would have to prove it. As I hung up the phone, I sat back and let out a deep breath. There was still a long way to go, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The healing wouldn't happen overnight, but it was happening, and maybe that was enough for now. The weight I had carried for so long wasn't completely gone, but it was lighter now, and in the silence that followed I found peace, not with Claire, not yet, but with myself, and that was all I needed. It's funny how time works, isn't it? One minute you're tangled in hurt and anger, and the next you've somehow found a way to let go of it. Not all at once, of course, but little by little. After that conversation with Claire, I wasn't sure what to expect. I wasn't sure if she was truly going to change, or if this was just another one of her half-hearted attempts. I wasn't ready to believe everything she said, not yet, but something in me, something deep inside me, knew I was doing the right thing by setting my boundaries. The next few weeks felt like a calm after a storm. There was no more waiting, no more anxiety about whether Claire would call or not. I knew she would. I knew she was trying, and that was enough for now. The silence between us, the distance that had felt like a wall for so long, was starting to feel like space, like room to breathe. I kept my distance not because I was angry anymore, but because I had learned to value my own peace. I had spent so many years giving, and for once I wasn't giving my time or energy to anyone who wasn't willing to show up for me in the same way. I wasn't about to let anyone make me feel small or insignificant again. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally saw Claire again. She had texted me earlier in the week, asking if I wanted to have lunch together. I had agreed, but I didn't know what to expect. I was cautious, and I think, deep down, I knew she was nervous. She had no idea what kind of reception she was going to get from me, but I didn't want to hold on to the past anymore. I didn't want to make her pay for everything that had happened. I was ready to move on. I arrived at the small cafe on Main Street, the one we used to go to when she was a teenager. It was quiet, the kind of place where you could sit for hours without anyone rushing you out the door. I sat at a table near the window, watching the cars go by, trying to calm the nerves I hadn't expected. When Claire walked in, I saw her immediately. She looked different, not in the way people change after a few years, but in a deeper, more supple way. Her shoulders weren't hunched anymore. She stood a little taller, a little more sure of herself. She had the same nervous energy about her, but this time it felt different. She wasn't coming to me to apologize. She was coming to show me that she had changed. She walked over, and I stood up to meet her, but I didn't rush. I didn't want to make this moment too dramatic or emotional. We had both been through enough of that already. I just wanted to sit down and talk, like two people who were trying to rebuild something that had been broken. "Hey, Mom," she said quietly, sitting down across from me. "How've you been?" I smiled, the warmth in my chest unexpected. "I've been good. Busy, you know. You?" "Same," she said, but there was an edge of hesitation in her voice. She was nervous, but this time I wasn't the one who was anxious. "I'm sorry for everything, Mom. For all the times I took you for granted, for all the times I wasn't there. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying. I really am." I could feel the sincerity in her words, in the way she looked at me, and I realized then that she wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She was giving it to herself. She was finally doing what she should have done years ago, taking responsibility. And I realized that's all I had ever really wanted from her. Not the perfect daughter, Not the one who was always going to get everything right, just someone who would own their mistakes and try to do better. "I'm not asking for you to forgive me right away," Claire continued, her voice trembling a little. "But I need you to know that I'm here now. I'm not going anywhere." I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. There was still so much to rebuild, so much that had been broken beyond repair, but this moment, this was a start. "Claire," I said softly, leaning forward, "I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for someone who can be honest with me, who can show up when it matters. I'm not going to wait for you to prove yourself anymore, but if you want to be a part of my life, you need to show up. Every day, not just when it's convenient for you." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I will. I swear I will." I didn't need her to promise me anything else. This moment, this conversation was enough. For now. The lunch was quiet after that, but comfortable. We didn't need to fill every second with words. It was enough just to be there, together. I didn't expect everything to be fixed overnight. I didn't expect us to be the way we once were. But that wasn't the point anymore. I had let go of that old version of our relationship, the one where I held onto every disappointment, every hurt, every betrayal. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating something new, something real. As we finished our meal, Claire reached across the table, her hand hovering for a moment before gently resting on mine. "I'm glad we're doing this," she said, her voice quieter now. "Me too," I replied, squeezing her hand. "But remember, this isn't a free pass. This is just the beginning." We both sat there in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was just peaceful. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't waiting for anyone. I had waited for so long for someone to show up for me, but now I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for Claire. I wasn't waiting for Robert. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I had waited for so long for someone to show up for me, but now I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for Claire. I wasn't waiting for Robert. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I had learned that the only person I could count on was myself, and for the first time I was okay with that. I was more than okay. I was free. And that was enough. It's been months since that lunch with Claire. I've thought about that day often, replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I had said the right things or if I'd been too harsh. But what I've realized in these months is that it wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about standing my ground, setting boundaries, and reclaiming my peace. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've done that. Claire and I have made progress since then. Slowly, carefully. She calls me more often now. Sometimes we just talk about small things, the weather, a recipe I found that I think she'll like, a new book I've read. The conversations are simple, but they're genuine. And while things aren't perfect, I've come to understand that perfection isn't the goal. It's the effort, the consistency, the willingness to show up even when it's hard. There are still days when I feel the ache of everything we've lost. I think about the times Claire was too busy, too distracted, to be there for me when I needed her. I think about how I spent so many years trying to keep everything together while feeling invisible. I think about those 8 hours in the airport, the way I had waited, feeling like an afterthought. It still stings sometimes, but what I've learned is that the past doesn't define me, and it doesn't define us. The other day, Claire came over to visit. We spent the afternoon in the garden, and I showed her how to prune the roses, something I'd always loved doing. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a monumental shift in our relationship, but it was something. We were together, and we were learning to navigate this new chapter in our lives, one step at a time. I don't know where this road will take us. I don't know if Claire and I will ever be as close as we once were, or if I'll ever feel like the daughter I once had is truly back. But that's not my focus anymore. My focus is on me, my life, my peace, my boundaries. I've spent too many years looking outside myself for validation, for love, for approval, and I've spent too many years giving pieces of myself away only to watch them disappear. But now I'm whole again. I'm not just Mary, the mother, the grandmother, the one everyone turns to when they need something. I'm Mary, the woman who knows her worth, who doesn't settle for scraps, who stands tall even when the world feels like it's pushing her down. And that's what this journey has been about, learning to stand up for myself, learning that I don't have to wait for anyone to come back for me. I am enough, just as I am. I've always been enough. I didn't need them to change for me. I needed to change for myself, and that's where the real transformation happened. I've learned to let go of the weight of other people's expectations. I've learned that love doesn't have to come with strings attached. It doesn't have to be conditional. It doesn't have to be earned. It just has to be real. I've learned that the best kind of revenge isn't about getting even or proving a point. It's about living your life on your own terms, regardless of what anyone else thinks or does. And that, my dear friends, is the sweetest form of victory. So when I look back now, I don't see that sad, abandoned woman in the airport anymore. I see a woman who has stood her ground, a woman who has fought for her own peace, a woman who is finally living her truth. And that's enough. I'm enough. And that's all that matters.